All right. Good evening, gentlemen, and Merry Christmas. We're trying to do an NFL style maneuver here where we take something that happens on Sunday afternoon and move it to Thursday night. Uh, so hopefully everybody enjoys it. Hopefully everybody had a good Christmas. Just to remind you that if you want to become a part of the discussions, you have to join the Discord server. The link can be found in the video description there. And yeah, we got. I'd say the last book club we did, we had an awful lot of very funny chapters, and I think these ones are getting a little more serious and a little more dour. So, um, but still thought provoking and interesting. So we'll start on chapter 110. Um, as we left off, they were leaking whale oil the last chapter, and Starbuck prevailed upon Captain Ahab to actually stop and do that. And it turns out that the leak was very deep, so they had to fill up the entire deck of the ship while they were in dock with all of the stuff that's in the hold. And Queequeg was working his butt off there, and he manages to catch a very severe cold there. And there's this long passage in the middle where he talks about the visions that he's having in his fever dreams, I suppose we might call them. Um, and Queequeg wants a Nantucket style casket, which is apparently like a canoe. I'm not sure what those are actually supposed to look like. And because he's dying, the carpenter is quite happy to provide him with his last bequest there. Kit says a bunch of very odd things because he's lost his mind. But then Queequeg remembers that he's left some duty on shore that he hasn't attended to yet. And so he decides he's not going to die, and then recovers his strength, which apparently he can just do that. Maybe he can't survive anything in the world, but mere illness won't kill him unless he allows it to. So Queequeg in his coffin.
Yeah. I like the whole thing about like I was like, wait a minute, Queequeg dies? Like what? Because this chapter just written like it's a foregone conclusion that he's kaput. And several times, right? And then this whole thing about the discussion comes up, right? Because it's talking to him and he's like, I want this type of coffin, and I want this. And yeah, there's a whole discussion about, well, yeah, I can't prevent whales and storms from taking me out, but sickness, yeah, it's all me. So it's like, what?
Well,
So of course we don't know if the unreliable narrator is, how reliable the unreliable narrator is in this particular instance.
Well, in a previous chapter, our dear unreliable narrator already said that Queequeg had like officiated his will like 5 times or something like that. Like they had actually gone and like he had gone and been the like the notary for his will multiple times. And so it's like there is a bit of that kind of just like sailor's melodrama that's going on. But I did really like also just kind of the touch of the sort of, what would you say, like the superstition of the other sailors, where they go and once Queequeg finally, like him being sick and completely out for the count wasn't enough to convince anybody, but as soon as he starts getting the measurements, the one guy is like, oh, poor fellow, he'll have to die now. It's like the measurements were done, and that means he's for sure going to be dead.
Yeah, I should say. Now, all of this stuff about the visions that he was having when he was close to death. Yeah, that was. I don't know what to make of it. Was there anything? Did you guys have any particular insight on that part?
I mean, I part of my problem with these chapters, the first few chapters anyway, was it's almost like the writing has changed quite a bit, right? It's much more metaphorical and allegorical, and less tethered to anything, as near as I can tell. Like it's just really kind of out there. and it's very hard to tell from the writing where the visions are. Because are these visions that Ishmaelville is having, or are these visions that Queequeg is having, or are these visions? Like, are these part of the story? Like, that was I could not work that out. I was like, I'm not quite sure what I'm reading here at all the moments, right? Like, because it's all allegorical. It's all very um it's all very visual based, right? It's all images and imagery and representations. And so yeah, I couldn't really tell which parts were like specifically his vision.
Yeah, we don't
Yeah,
get a whole lot of detail as to exactly what he's seeing. And so it's like Ishmaelville's looking at Queequeg and, kind of the looks he's got in his eyes, and just assuming that those are actually profound heavenly visions. But uh, we never hear what exactly he saw, or like even like a kind of a recap of them. So, it could be like, I don't know if you guys have ever had like what was in the moment a really meaningful dream, and then you wake up and you
Yeah.
realize it was all just kind of nonsense, and it not interesting at all. Like that very well could also be the case. It's just Ishmael. They're looking at Queequeg and assuming that he's having um, profound thoughts, but maybe not really.
Yeah, well, and I think a lot of that is the contrast, which is going to become even more clear later on, right? Which is to your point about, oh, we measured him. He's surely a goner now, right? And then that theme's gonna come roaring back. It's been here before, but Ishmaelville gets pretty explicit about that particular theme about measurement later on. So it looks a lot to me like the chapter is really more about the connectedness of the real world versus the certainty but disconnectedness from reality of something like measurement or contracts or agreements or impressions. Like all of those are divorced from, we'll say, the miracle of reality, because in this case it's a miracle that he recovers, at least as told. And so the fact that it's a miracle that he recovers as told, I think that's the thread, because like I said, it opens with, oh, Quick dies. I'm like, wait a minute. Does he die here now and under these? Really? And he says it in a very certain way in the chapter 3 times at least that I remember. And I was like, this doesn't this isn't sitting right with me. And then he goes through the whole thing, and then he does the measure thing, and I'm still quite not sure what's going on, because I'm like, what is this book? What's happening here? These chapters are different. And actually I looked it up. I wasn't looking that up. I was looking up some words. There's a lot of words. I was like, wait a minute. I'm learning more vocabulary here than I have in years. This is great. And I noticed a few people commented that yes, the whole writing style, well, they said a writing style, the style didn't change so much as to maybe the severity of the contrast in the writing or something. It's definitely a different, this particular chapter is written a little bit differently. Yeah, it's not a different author, right? It is different in a way that exemplifies that something is being said differently. Right? In most books, you're saying the same thing. You're saying everything the same way, and maybe you're making 5 or 6 points. Right? Melville seems to be making, like, I don't know, 6 really deep, very important points through hard contrast, very high contrast, but in different ways over and over again, which I think is actually better. Right? Repetition is a quality all its own, effectively, in terms of convincing people. And I'm pretty sure that's what's really going on here, is just that he's kind of experimenting with, how poetic can I get in this particular chapter. And then, because I think also I'd have to actually go do some real research to determine this, but I'm getting the sense that pattern in one of the patterns in the writing here is that he's going from very abstract and poetic down into very exact and quote scientific, and the whole time destroying the scientific, right? Not dispensing with it, right? Just destroying, we'll say it's overreaching claims, which I couldn't be more thrilled with. If anything, nothing could make me happier in life. Nothing. It's glorious.
I really like the contrast between, especially between Queequeg and Pip, because you do have this aspect of like, even when he's sick, and I really like the touch where it says, you know, a sick civilized man may be 6 months convalescing, but generally speaking, a savage is almost half well again in a day. But you have this thing where he's like, he's lying in the coffin, and it's not only does he have his harpoon, but it's lined with biscuits and everything. Like he's got provisions for his death and everything. And then even so, Pip shows up, and like Queequeg is giving all of these orders and everything to the point where they said something, yeah, of all mortals, some dying men are the most tyrannical, and certainly since they'll shortly
Yes.
trouble us so little forevermore, the poor fellows ought to be indulged. And so he's there just giving all these orders, and he's got all these requests and everything for his coffin. And he, like, even if he's in kind of like a half dream state, like he's pretty coherent. But then you have Pip, and there's actually nothing wrong with him except for like spiritually or psychologically that he's got going on, and he's just completely insane. And so it's like, you know, it should be the reverse. And then as soon as he's led away, Queequeg gets better. And it's like the contrast vanishes as soon as Pip is out of the room.
I didn't even notice that. Oh no, that's great. Yeah, and I'd forgotten about the little poke at the civilized man versus the like civilized men can't handle illness. The savages get super sick, and a day and a half later they're good to go. They're back to normal. Yeah. It's a real stab too. It's a real like iron through the heart.
So do you think it was all of Pip's raving that reminded Queequeg of whatever duty it was that made him decide not to die?
Well, Pip does give him an errand, right? He tells him to look for Pip.
Yeah. It's like, if you find Pip, tell all the Antilles he's a runaway.
Yeah. I do think there's something there that, you know, that he's given a job in a sense that he realized, like, oh, actually, I do have a job to do. Like maybe not that one, you know, but I don't know. I do think you're right.
Yeah.
There's something there.
Well, I think you're right, Castle. He's reminded that jobs exist, and therefore he has one, and therefore, right?
Yeah. Well, there's that thing with, like, you know, people that retire, even if they retire young and they just get like sick, you know, like right away if they have nothing to do. And even those guys that like retire in their 40s and 50s, they just start like being unwell if they don't have something to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And then he starts carving the outline of his tattoos into his coffin there, and he's what is it? And this tattooing had been the work of a departed prophet and seer of his island, who, by those hieroglyphic marks, had written out on his body a complete theories of the heavens and the earth and a mystical treatise on the art of attaining truth. So that Queequeg, in his own proper person, was a riddle to unfold, a wondrous work in one volume, but whose mysteries not even he himself can read, throw his own live heartbeat against them. Oh, yeah. Well, maybe they're trying to read it the wrong way, you know, and trying to interpret it in a manner that it's not intended to be interpreted. But Ahab says of him, "Oh, devilish tantalization of the gods." Yeah. Something about those pagan civilizations and the connection they have with things, which are lost by the process of civilization, maybe.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of the message, is that
Mhm.
the civilization takes you further away from godliness or something. Um,
Well,
eh,
it takes you further away from nature anyway, because you're being insulated from it.
well, yeah, and I think, I mean, you're the priest, but I'm pretty sure uh, nature was sort of like, what would you say, created by God, and therefore, if you're further from nature, you're further from God. But I don't know. I'm a novice at these things.
Well, being close to nature won't necessarily make you close to God, but if used properly, it will. So,
But being further from nature makes you further from God. That would be that's more my point. Because you're further from his creation, right?
I suppose every cloister has a courtyard with a garden.
When you need right, and you need both. And that I think is the prop. See, part of the contrast of the pagan versus well, in this case the Puritans, because they're Quakers in particular, but Puritans in general, is, the Puritans held this high church and all this, very specific tradition and liturgy and whatever, such that it is in the Puritan world. Um, but the pagans are closer because they don't have civilization in the way, right? And so it's like, well, yeah, but they're not in alignment with the one true creator God, right? And so, right, so like, well, yeah, when you divorce yourself from, when all you have is nature and you don't have civilization, then you don't have a way to get to the one, right? But 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 the thing that Melville's fighting here is the other way around, right? Which is to say, oh, well, we don't have that connection with nature, and therefore, you know you you're not closer in a way. It's
Mm.
like, well, yeah, you need that proper balance. And I think part of the argument that Ishmaelville at least has been making this whole time is that when you're, say, holy or in the church or whatever, uh, and you're out on the seas, going after whales, then you have the perfect combination of those two things, and now you're more holy or closer to God, or whatever, like that. I think because he's made that pretty much that thesis a number of times already.
Yeah, whalemen are among the greatest specimens that God has ever produced. So
Has
it should
everyone
obviously
well
be the
known.
case that they live the most perfect lifestyle. Like, I don't know how you, I don't know how you come to any other conclusion.
Yeah. Universally chiseled and also the longest running profession of all. So it's just globally available even for people who never set foot on the sea. Uh, but yeah, I do think there's. I mean, I think it's really interesting because you have Ishmael and Ahab kind of marveling in a sort of like riddle solving way, or like a desiring way at Queequeg's tattoos. But then he says Queequeg can't even read them himself. So it's also this like he doesn't need the theory behind it, but also like he does lack that extra little bit. That that he lacks the frame that they're trying to access it in, to the point about like the integration. But it makes me it reminds me of that guy. Is it Saint Charbel of Lebanon? That he was like famously quoted as saying like, "Oh, I have a place on this earth," even though like no one saw his face because he had his habit on with the big old hood, until no one actually saw his face for like his entire career, basically, because he was always looking that even when he celebrated mass, no one knew what they just saw like the end of his beard and everything. But then the guy's like outpacing basically everyone else for medically documented miracles. He's up to something like 34,000 or something like that they have medical paperwork for. And it's like,
That's matching Our Lady of Lourdes right there. Holy
yeah.
mackerel.
And I'm like, man, for like, when you're in like the dulia bracket, like those are some pro numbers that he's pulling in. And it's like, yeah, he lived the ascetic, like very heavenly life, but he was like, no, my place is on earth. And it's like, obviously, he's just getting work done all day long.
Yeah. Holy mackerel. Saint Charbel, pray for us. Well, another mysterious chapter. Hopefully, we've been able to enlighten you a little bit on the mysteries. Chapter 111, the Pacific, is a little bit shorter, and I've only ever encountered the Pacific Ocean from a beach in California. And my impression of the Pacific Ocean is that the waves were bigger there than they were in the Atlantic. Now, this
Oh
is
yeah.
this is just a small sample size, right? Because I just go to the beach every once in a while. But at least I had one very unpleasant experience getting tumbled around in the ocean in the Pacific, and so that's left its main impression. But apparently, if you're out on the sea and there isn't a storm, it's actually very nice. You could smell some of the trees and the spices coming from a nearby island. It's got long, undulating waves, and compares it to the great, wide, rolling, watery prairies and potter's fields of all four continents. Um, and puts him into a once again puts him into a meditative mood there. Um, and Ahab, even he seems to be impervious to the charms of the Pacific. That he's not actually going to relax here, but he is indifferent to this and continues to be absolutely uh, uh, obsessed with finding the white whale.
Mhm.
So he's just standing there, and the beauty of nature, which is all around him, when she can access at any time, is just completely lost on him, which is probably where the contrast with the previous chapter comes from.
Right. Yeah, it's more of this literary play around um, contrasting the connectedness of the world with the disconnectedness due to this obsession. Right. You're focused on death, right? And then you build a coffin, and then you get measured, and surely you're going to die, right? Oh, what focused on the white whale? There's all this beauty around you, and it's temporary. It's not like it's there all the. It's not like you're leisurely about it because it's constant bombardment, but it appears, and you're not connected to it because you're just focused on the white whale. And so it's the same sort of thing where I mean, there's so much going on in the chapters, but it's the same sort of contrasting effect where he's trying to point out this obsession, like what if you the Jonathan Peugeot, the world is attention. Yes, the world is attention, my friends. It really is, and the author's trying to give you a sense for how that works.
Think I thought it was interesting that it seemed like he did the contrast by utilizing Ahab's nostrils there. So you have it says with one nostril he unthinkingly snuffed the sugary musk from the Bashi Isles, in whose sweet woods mild lovers must be walking, and with the other consciously inhaled the salt breath of the newfound sea. The sea in which the hated white whale must have even then be swimming. So he's consciously breathing with one nostril and then unconsciously breathing with the other one. But it's
Right.
like he has no grounding. Like he is completely just like he rejects the land one that has the nice sort of poetic connotation and the nice smells and it's sugary and all these things. But it's all salt. And like he is deciding to smell that. According to Ishmaelville, of course, has access to Ahab's olfactory records, but
Yeah,
Right.
no, he's few thoughts of Pan stirred in Ahab's brain. Ishmael just knows that.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, and also it's a split, right? And of course, it's notable that later on, in world history, um, Freud and Jung will come to much the same conclusion. Right. And so, Freud
Like,
came up with the unconscious. And I'm like, I
oh,
don't know. I don't think so. I don't think you guys understand how this works at all. And you're not either you're well read and bad remembered, or you're missing a bunch of stuff about the world.
yeah. So just a short little chapter there. move on to chapter 112, the blacksmith. So we've had the carpenter before and what sort of
Mm.
fellow he is, and now we're going to learn about the ship's blacksmith there, and we get this sense that he is just all work, and he's constantly toiling at his forge there, and he just seems like an old broken man. And we hear about how the fact that he used to be quite a productive village blacksmith, owned his own business, had a wife and children, and everything was fine until he took to the drink. And it sounds like the drink ended up making him unproductive. And we don't know exactly how it happens, but the blacksmith's wife and two children both die. Um, and he loses his house. And uh, there's this bit near the end where it talks about having compunctions about suicide. You don't think suicide's right. So he does the next best thing and goes off to sea, which is like, yeah, if you're a vagabond and you want to get away from wherever you're at, uh, just do like what Ishmael does. You get like free room and board, but it's kind of like being dead because you're not connected to the rest of society. So, yeah, but he is, yeah, he had a peculiar walk there, and the story is kind of told um, out of order. Yeah,
Yeah. It's a confusing chapter. I like though that, I mean, I suppose this is allusions back to Cain and Abel now, right? He let the robber into his house. It's
mhm.
like, yeah, you courted that, didn't you? Yeah. It
You
didn't.
do know a Bible story, Mark. Good job.
That's Peterson's fault. I don't. He talks about a con. The guy's obsessed with Cain and Abel, completely obsessed with one story in the Bible. It's like, bro, I think there's more there. You could probably like move on at some point, but what do I know? Too long, did not read. Castle, we can't hear you. You're muted.
Yeah, here I am. The burglar was the he called it the bottle conjurer, which was almost my subtitle. But that was so it was a guy that was selling him alcohol was the burglar that or like that he was giving all of his money to them.
Mm.
I that was what I was getting is that he had basically all the money that he would have otherwise spent on like actually caring for his family. He spent it all on some dude that was selling him stuff.
Right, but didn't he say he let the robber into his house? Isn't that
Says,
a
and
line in
darker
there?
yet to tell, the blacksmith himself did ignorantly conduct this burglar into the family's heart. It was the bottle conjurer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So whether or not the guy actually showed up and robbed them, or if he was just doing it slowly by selling him alcohol, I don't know.
No, he didn't show up and rob him. No.
No.
Let him into his house is the same illusion that Peterson makes with Cain and Abel. Yeah.
Mm.
You courted him.
Apparently, the Bottle Conjurer was the stage name given to a hoax theatrical performer advertised to appear at the Haymarket Theatre in England on 16th of January, 1749. While on stage, the acrobat was to have placed his body inside an empty wine bottle in full view of the audience. When he failed to appear for the widely billed performance, the audience rioted and gutted the theater.
Wow.
So I guess this was something that people might have remembered in those days, but
Mm.
yeah.
Who knows what illusions that phrase had to them, right? This is always,
I love Ishmael's description of just of the guy that everyone wants something from this guy. And so they all have their hands out with some sort of project that they want him to work on, just like the carpenter. But it seems like this guy's in slightly higher demand. And then it's just so overly done, the caricature of silent, slow, and solemn, bowing over still further, his chronically broken back toiled away as if toil were life itself. Just like, oh my goodness, this guy is just in such horrible condition. And then even more horrifying was the imagery of the 1,000 mermaids singing to him to Like, just completely throw his life away and go off and put up thy gravestone too within the churchyard and come hither till we marry thee. It's like, oh my goodness. It's just that dude is not doing well.
Yeah, that's not any allusion to the siren song or anything.
Right.
I'm sure.
It's like,
Yeah.
Hip is doing better than this guy.
Well, and you probably get the sense too that Ishmaelville there is we'll say no friend to work, or at least work is no friend to him, and therefore to toil, I mean, there's the lowest circle of hell right there from his perspective. I'm quite certain of that.
Yeah.
There's no worse crime than toil. My goodness.
But even with the carpenter, he goes and projects that the carpenter isn't like having any sort of internal monologue, and then equates that with not having a soul. It's just like, oh my goodness.
Work, yeah. If you're working, you don't have a soul. You didn't know that, Castle? That's
No, obviously.
definitely the way the world is.
Hello, some people like working.
Some people do. We call them crazy people, but yes, they're out there.
You call them crazy people, but if you had one working for you, you'd be very happy.
I love my crazy people. Don't I, Cass?
Well, my favorite people are crazy. Alrighty. Well, the blacksmith has some work to do here in chapter 113, the forge. Ahab wants a new harpoon, but he doesn't want just like a standard harpoon. He brings the metal himself, and I guess it was what the first things they brought in. Well, there was this interesting part about how the blacksmith was quite certain that he could smooth out any metal that had been beaten up, all except one. And then Ahab immediately asks if he can put his head in the vise and smooth that out. And he's like, "Now that's the one thing that I can't fix with my my arts and crafts here." But then he goes and he wants to get a new harpoon made out of the steel shoes of racing horses. Apparently, these will be really good. But he's very involved in the creation of his new harpoon, and makes him do a few things over again. And then he makes the barbs out of razors, and I think we might have the wrong connotation with razors, since I'm sure you're either using an electric nowadays or you're using small disposable razors. But in those days, you would have had the long, much more blade-like ones, and because it's going on your skin, that was usually the highest quality steel that you could get access to. And so Ahab is taking away his highest quality steel, and using that for the tip of his barb. And then he calls upon Queequeg, Tashtigo, and Dagu to offer up their blood to cool the hot tips of the barbs there, and then says, "Ego non baptizo te in nomine Patris, sed in nomine Diaboli." Which did your edition have footnotes to that?
No.
No, I intuited that he basically consecrated it to Satan or something.
Yeah, I do not baptize you in the name of the Father, but in the name of the devil. So,
I didn't get the devil part. I got most of the words.
Yeah. Said in nomine Diaboli. I could break it down grammatically. It's actually quite simple. But yeah.
Oh, Diablo. Oh, yeah. Stupid me. Okay, my bad then. I read that one and I went, I don't know. And then I referenced something that I went, yeah. Long story. It is a personal attack levied at myself some number of months ago in a live stream, and I went, yeah. Diabolos.
Okay, yeah. So, not good. And then
no.
They put it together, and puts it together with the pole and the iron and the rope, like the three fates remained inseparable. And Ahab is brutally stalked away with the weapon. Um, and Pip lets out a wretched laugh because I think he just kind of catches whatever spirit's flying by, and that
Mm.
that
Mhm.
that just kind of comes out of him. So yeah, this but the blacksmith, who's kind of a broken man, but continues to excel in his skill and his craft, takes the best work that he can manufacture, combines that with an evil invocation from Ahab and the blood of a pagan culture to create a horrifying weapon which apparently can kill God. So,
Yeah. Yeah, and at one point, Ahab takes over the forge,
mhm.
builds part of it himself, and like there's all sorts of hybridization going on here, and yeah, how you cure the steel, quench it, and then cure it makes a big difference. And I don't know, other than the consecration, I don't think blood is. I don't know how that would work. So I had a friend who's a blacksmith, and one of the things he taught me, which unless you know a blacksmith, you probably don't realize this, but if you have a hot piece of steel and you quench it in the water partly, the heat runs up the metal. Like it actually moves up the metal, and the top of the metal will get hotter than the bottom of the metal. And this is significant because a lot of times the metal is not so hot that you can't handle it with your hand. But if you make that mistake, and he said, "Yeah, I've done that once, only once, right? Like you burn your hand, even when you had it, your hand wasn't going to burn. You quench it, you burn your hand because the heat actually moves up. Now, I don't understand that scientifically at all because in science that can't happen. But I believe him because he was a blacksmith and knew what the hell he was talking about. So um, yeah, I was like, "Oh, that's fascinating." Because it's heat and it dissipates and bleh. No, it moves, and it moves rather fast when you try to kill it effectively. So I don't even know how this blood quenching would work because, as far as I can tell, there's no way to do it because you need a bucket basically to quench it in. So the way they described it, it wasn't clear if they had a bucket of blood or what they were actually doing to do the quenching of the barbs. Um, but yeah, I mean, the fact of the matter is, it looks like it could be two or three different types of steel. There's two makers, and there's this weird. There's two types of quenching going on, and then there's this weird ritual that he's doing with the pagans and their blood to consecrate it. So there's a lot of hybridization.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder if you would have to. I mean, I don't want to like spend too much time thinking about the logistics of blood quenching a harpoon, but I mean, they probably like drizzled from above. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. But yeah,
Yeah.
like I don't. I think it's mostly just for the fact of like saying that you did it. I don't think there's actually like any real
Well,
function.
there's no reasonable reason to do it that way.
Right.
Right.
The shock value is the point.
Yeah.
And
But
blood is warm. It's not cold. So it's not a
mm,
good quenching material for that reason.
And
yeah.
you'd think it would leave like a caked on residue and get into the metal somehow.
Yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah.
They probably have a pretty horrid appearance, and the smell is probably.
Yeah. I
So yeah,
Probably not.
There was an interesting comedic part of this that I enjoyed though, where the initial introduction, or like when he goes and just kind of shows up near Perth, it reminded me a lot of the when he wanted to uh, have his hand in the vice of the carpenter, saying like, "I like a firm grip," which is just so ridiculous. But then he
Mm.
says, he says here, "I'm no paradise myself. I'm impatient of all misery in others that is not mad. Thou shouldst go mad, blacksmith. Say, why dost thou not go mad? How canst thou endure without being mad? Do the heavens yet hate thee that thou canst not go mad? What are you making there?" It's just like immediately, and it's just. But then he goes and he says, If thou couldst, blacksmith, glad enough would I lay my head upon thy anvil, and feel thy heaviest hammer between my eyes. Answer, canst thou smooth the seam? It's just like this dude is getting up to all kinds of antics around the ship, like just putting his missing leg on some other guy's leg to just like kind of project the phantom pains and everything like that. It's just this dude is just a complete menace to everyone. Like he's no longer the awful like looming figure in the captain's quarters or anything. He's just going around just terrorizing everyone.
And also that contrast between almost wanting to be a hybrid himself, right? Like wanting the materialistic, scientific way of doing things, carpentry and blacksmithing, to be applied to him to assuage his spiritual ills effectively, right? Like, I want you to fix me with your craftsmanship.
That's the 21st century. The 21st century equivalent of that would be asking for an AI therapist.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Well, yeah, right. And that pattern's everywhere. I mean, this isn't quite so scientific because it's drawing that third thing, which is the proper melding between, we'll say, the materialist and the spiritualist worldview is called craftsmanship. Technically, that's what it would be, right? So you can be a carpenter and not be a craftsman, but you can be a craftsman in carpentry, and that means you've got some spirit that you're imbuing into the material that you're working with somehow. And that's a very different thing. It's a different way of thinking. Maybe I'll have to talk to Rachel Fulton Brown about this. Like, maybe that's part of the difference between a medieval way of thinking and the so-called, quote, modern age of gnosis, is what I call it, way of thinking. So that might be a good way to think about what's going on here, is that Ishmaelville here is contrasting all of that sort of at once.
Yeah. Oh, the one thing that the blacksmiths did not think he could smooth out was a human head. That was the thing that could not be fixed by his technique.
Well, the furrow between his brow, which it's implied is basically the manifestation of Moby Dick upon the person of Ahab, and that, right, that's the wrinkle he can't take out of something,
which is burrowed into his skull, he says.
Right. No,
Yeah.
he says nothing. I'm sure that's true. Yes, that is correct. That is exactly what happened.
I'm sure the carpenter could have smoothed it out if he asked him, though.
Can confirm.
Yeah, Carpenter wasn't able to build him the 60-foot version of himself.
Yeah. See, he asked the wrong questions of each one. Like, the blacksmith probably could have made that, and the other guy could have smoothed out his head.
Yeah, that's true, too. Yeah, there's a lot of, well, he's already played with categorical confusions earlier, so I'm sure, Castle, that's actually what's going on there too. Is he's doing so much, all at once. It's really quite a text.
Yeah. After this whole incident, we get a little break. Chapter 114, The Glider. And they apparently are having this is more like more of this how beautiful the Pacific Ocean is business, and apparently it does smooth Ahab out a little bit, but like he says, it's only a temporary effect. But if these secret golden keys did seem to open in him his own secret golden treasuries, yet did his breath upon them prove tarnishing. So even though the beautiful Pacific should be putting him into a lovely mood, his own obsession is just continuing to and it's just continuing to make him mad, basically. Then we get to the end of the chapter. Starbuck is looking out at it, and he looks at this, and it only strengthens his belief in God, and Stubb just says, "I am Stubb," and Stubb has his history, but here Stubb takes oaths that he has always been jolly, and that's Stubb's reaction to the uh, the beauty that is surrounding him. He just um, the surroundings that he's in has no effect on Stubb's mood. He's always just cheerful and singing, and it's just yeah, he doesn't need the beautiful Pacific Ocean to cheer him up. He has always been jolly. So you can see that even when you're surrounded by the nature, it depends on what sort of person you are, what kind of effect that's going to have. Um, uh, Starbucks says, "I look deep down and do believe." That's his.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's his reaction.
Yeah,
Speaking of furrowed brows, Mark.
I enjoyed some of the lines in this one. I mean, especially there on the last page where he goes and he says, "There's no steady, unretracing progress in this life. We do not advance through fixed gradations." And at the one last pause, through infancy's unconscious spell, boyhood's thoughtless faith, adolescence's doubt, the common doom, then skepticism, then disbelief, resting at last in manhood's pondering repose of if. But once gone through, we trace the round again and are infants, boys, and men and ifs eternally. That is probably not ideal, but also probably probably realistically what a lot of these sailors are experiencing.
Well, yeah, and it's like even for somebody who's on a good path and somebody who is we'll say oriented properly, there's going to be periods of like failing, doubt, confusion, and then transformation that leads to growth continually. So the older you get, the more of these you've gone through, and maybe the less distressing they are. But you just figure these things out, and you keep on changing. But it does kind of come in cycles, and you're never properly resting in there.
Yeah, there is I mean, I think I just felt a certain restlessness in the repose of if. It's just like, oh, I don't know that it seems a little bit like you got an ongoing cycle, but also kind of like a regression a little bit, and not just in the sort of normal like, oh, I'm backsliding because I'm learning something new. I don't know. But I also liked it was interesting that it's Starbuck of all people going and saying, loveliness unfathomable as ever lovers saw in this young bride's eye. Tell me not of thy teeth-tiered sharks and thy kidnapping cannibal ways. And it's like, I don't know. That's just
He's talking to the sea.
Yeah.
He's talking to the sea right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to hear about the sharks and the evil right now. I just want to believe in this beauty right here.
Yeah, it's a little less cautious of Starbuck than I'm used to, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when you go to mass, you don't really want to know the contents of the priest's last confession.
Yeah, fair enough.
He puts on the vestments, he goes and conducts the sacred rituals, and you just want to believe that this is working. And underneath him there's going to be teeth-tiered sharks and kidnapping cannibal ways, because he is subject to the rest of the human foibles there. But you might just need to look at it and say, well, right now it's beautiful, and that's enough. And the goodness and the beauty here is better than the bloodshed and the evil.
Just I don't know. If I'm looking at the priest and he's trying to tell me of his kidnapping cannibal ways, and I'm not listening.
Like I said, he saves that for the confessor.
Yeah.
Right.
Now is not the time.
Well, that's always the danger with these things, right? Once you use literature to open up the innermost workings of characters, you sort of exemplify to people that that's a thing that can be done. And then they, make public confessions on YouTube about their inability to deal with a death or whatever, right? Their failure and it's like, you didn't want to tell everybody that. Believe me, you didn't want to tell everybody that. And then you get weird documentaries and the whole nine yards and then reality TV and now and then of course you can't do that, right? You can't make private forbidden things public because it affects them, and then and then the nature changes, and it just the cycle starts all over again.
Well, there is a little bit of that. I think we had talked about it was, I don't know how long ago it was on the book club with the architecture, like the beautiful ornate architecture, also having the double sort of functionality of hiding all the dust and everything. That
Right.
if you have these amazing pillars and everything like that, you actually don't need to clean them as often. It's like you could look at them and say, I want to believe that there's no dust on those.
Right.
This is a beautiful building.
Well, and crown molding covers a joint, and things like that, right? Like these things are designed to cover up the inner workings with beauty, so that you don't see the magic or disenchant the magic, right? It's like you're adding magic, so you don't disenchant the magic.
It's not dirty. It just has a thriving microbiome.
Yes.
Speaking of thriving microbiomes, the Pequod meets the Bachelor. There's another gam with the Bachelor. The Bachelor has had the most profitable and excellent whaling vessel around. They had to trade some of their food for more casks so that they could fill up their hold with even more oil. And they get invited over to the Bachelor, right? Like, just come on over. We're having a great time. We're having a celebration. We're all in absolutely great mood. We have whale oil crammed into every possible container that can fit on this ship. So you're just utterly full of life right there. And Ahab just barks at him, "Have you seen the white whale?" And refuses to have anything to do with them as they're heading back to Nantucket there. So again, just the contrast here of you know, uh, I they could have taken a night to celebrate with a fellow Nantucket ship. They could have done that. Nobody would have thought that was wrong. Take shifts looking after the ships, but nope, nope. We're just gonna go find the whale. That's all there is. Finding the whale.
Yeah, and he's upset because the captain says he doesn't believe in the white whale. And it's sort of like his inability to believe in the white whale is their good fortune. And of course, our super reliable narrator tells us how stuffed the ship is and that there's basically barrels lashed to places on the ship that there shouldn't be barrels, and that the only place where there isn't actually whale oil are the captain's pockets, and only because he needs someplace to put his hands occasionally. Which is like,
But certainly a memorable turn of phrase.
he sounds like a pretty reliable narrator to me. I'm all in, because no one goes over to the ship. They refuse. The captain asks like 3 times, "Dude, just come over, we'll chat." And Ahab's like, "Nah, I'm just gonna bark at you from over here." And then he basically says, "Be on your way, get out of here," and sets his own sails to hurry back at basically in the other direction, right, towards doom, gloom, and destruction, and hopefully the white whale, or hopefully for him, and maybe not so hopefully for the rest of the crew. But Yeah, it's pretty funny. Like there's just whale oil coming out of everyone's ears, and like they've allegedly, no one's been on the ship, but allegedly
Right.
they've reconfigured the entire ship, including the galley, to stuff it with oil, including the table they eat on. And it's just like, okay, dude, you don't even see those things, and no one went over to the ship. So sure,
Well,
I'm sure.
obviously, he acquired this many years later. While speaking with the third mate of The Bachelor, in a tavern in Japan. That's how he got that
Exactly,
information, Mark.
exactly.
Obvious.
It's so funny.
I'm amazed that he didn't write about it in the book. He should have put that down. That's really important information.
Exactly.
It's probably next week's readings.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, they even disassembled the entire Triworks because it's just like there's no point in even bothering trying to refine anything else. Like we're completely packed. But
Yeah.
if it was, I was thinking about the captain's pockets that was the only thing that wasn't filled. But if it were Ishmael, he would have filled them, guaranteed.
Yes.
And specifically so he could put his hands there.
We
You'd never
know
get
how
them
much he
out.
likes putting his hands into whale oil. So
Yeah, you would never get those hands up.
oh yeah, and it's really interesting. It's called The Bachelor, but it explicitly points out that several of the sailors have eloped with island girls and are now are carrying them back to Nantucket. So
Well, their
symbolism
mission's
happens,
complete.
I guess.
Yeah, mission's complete. I mean, they literally disassembled the Triworks. Like that's just the ship is done.
Well, you can imagine a bunch of bachelors doing just that. So
Yeah.
all right, but from such a happy scene, we must move on to chapter 116. And in the wake of The Bachelor, the Pequod actually has quite a bit of success. It takes 4 whales in a short amount of time. I think all 4 boats, actually, if I read this chapter properly, were out, and all of them ended up taking whales, including Captain Ahab's boat. And apparently, this is, I haven't seen this. I've never killed a whale before, but apparently, dying whales will go and orient themselves towards the sun. Or if that's not something that's common, at least the one that Ahab killed did just that. And Ahab says, "Well, the sun gives life but once, so there's no point in you asking for it again because I've gone and killed you." Um, and then he talks about his kindredness with the sea. Born of earth, yet suckled by the sea, though hill and valley mothered me, ye billows are my foster brothers. So he feels himself rather whale like as well. So, short little chapter here. Um,
I'm not sure
Yeah.
if I really have all that much. I mean, it's just there's the one line that says "soothed again, but only soothed to deeper gloom." Was a good touch. But also, I was thinking of this thing where just in the last sentence of the previous chapter, he talks about he had a vial, I guess, of sand from Nantucket, and then he was making the sort of association between that and the other ship, and that we immediately cut to, and then the Pequod just slayed 4 whales or something. That it's just like there's even just like a tiny little pinch of regrounding or something, and then he's now able to actually do his job again.
Yeah, and the whales are all spread out, and it takes them forever to get them all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was like the 4 points of the compass, basically.
Right. And they pick up Ahab last at night.
Yeah, that's right. He was stuck out there.
I think that's the first whale Ahab's gotten too, isn't it?
I think it's the first one we've been told about.
Well, yeah. What do you mean? By a reliable narrator? Say it isn't so.
All right, we move on to chapter 117. And the Parsi and his crew are in Ahab's boat, as we heard about before. And apparently Ahab has been having prophetic dreams, and the Parsi confirms them and gives prophecies that Ahab cannot die at sea without first seeing two hearses, one of which is made with American wood. We also learned that the Parsi must go before him, and that only hemp can kill Ahab. And just a little bit of foreshadowing here. When he hears about the hemp, um, he immediately associated the gallows. You mean I'm immortal then, on land and on sea. Immortal on land and on sea. Well, let's see how that works out for you, Ahab. I guess that's what I'll have to say about that. So this, I think, is really setting up the action of the rest of the book. That from Ahab's perspective, there really is no reason why he shouldn't continue to uh, go after Moby Dick, because where is he going to see hearses on the sea? You know, I've never seen a sea hearse before. Maybe they have them in Venice. I'm not sure, but they're a long ways from Venice anyway. So he's immortal.
Yeah, I mean, just looking around, like if I were him, I'd just be sweating, right? Because only hemp can kill thee, but there's rope everywhere, and the Queequeg just had his coffin made from American wood, so it's like you just slap that on a boat and you've got a hearse essentially. I mean, that's as water hearse as you can probably get. I guess it's just slap a coffin on a canoe. I don't know what else it would look like.
So you're removing all the dramatic tension from the story here.
I mean, we read the chapter, and it's a very nice, a very nice coffin apparently.
But let me just think about the like prophecy is a hard thing to deal with, and it's given to us more in the form of a riddle here. Like, just look at the certainty he's got. The gallows, you mean? When he hears only hemp can kill thee, he just really thinks, oh, all that can mean is the gallows. And it's like, man, there's a lot of different ways that ropes on a boat can get you, because there's a lot of tension there, right? I mean, Mark's had more experience with ropes and boats than I have. There's a lot of tension there. Like, if the rope snapped at the wrong time, it could do something to you, right? Like, I don't know if it'd take your head clean off, but it could knock you over. Something could knock you over.
Yeah, I mean, the big danger with ropes, and they've talked about it before, is that you're in the boat and it's uncurling at a remarkable rate, and you get caught up in it. We've already seen this happen. It's kind of like, have you been on a boat, Ahab? Like, I don't even know what you're thinking at this point.
He's literally full of himself at this point.
Well, I mean, again, it's the world is attention, right? He's thinking, well, the only way then I can be killed is by the deliberate hand of man or something. And it's like, I don't know about that, bro. It just says hemp. It doesn't, like, but yeah, I mean, he's just so focused on, it doesn't occur to him that, well, yeah, I mean, I can't die at sea, right? Like, oh, okay, then that must mean all sea accidents. But I don't think that's a good interpretation.
Wasn't there the story that, pretty sure Ishmael was like condescending to the Peruvians or something like that? Weren't there like 3 people that were actually strung up? Like, I think they all survived, but they all had like nooses around them and they were on the boat. So it's like, they had a mobile gallows, and like the Ahab has nearly had, I think, 2 attempted mutinies on him that he quickly shut down. But I think we've had 2 attempted mutinies already.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So, I mean, it's really not that far off. He's that sure of himself.
Also true. Yeah, it's a good point.
And extremely advanced age, too. Which is just like, he's completely convinced it's only rope. Like, just, there's no way that, elderly mid-70s Ahab couldn't, I'm assuming he's somewhere in that range, like late 60s, early 70s, something like that. It's just like, yeah, in a dangerous lifestyle already with like an obvious disability, like no, it's just rope. Like everything else, we're totally good. It's like,
Specifically, being hung by somebody. That's the first thing
Yeah.
he thought
Yeah.
of.
it's
Right.
like I don't
right.
know, man. You've already been like, stake struck to the groin by your own leg. Like you're clearly not you're not invulnerable.
Well, let's see how this all works out for him. Chapter 118, the quadrant. So I guess they're up kind of in the northern part of the Pacific near Japan, and Ahab comes out of the cabin with his quadrant. I don't know quite how they work, but apparently it's a marvelous scientific instrument that allows you to calculate your latitude very precisely by measuring, I think it's the time of day. Yeah, like the time of day
The angle
and
of the
the
sun.
angle of the sun
Yeah.
and these sorts of things. He knows how it works. I don't need to know how it works. I live on land. Things don't move quite as much, and I can find myself pretty quickly. And he's looking up at the sun. It's got like a piece of colored glass on it, so it doesn't fry his eyes there. And he just um, he's frustrated with it because while it can tell him where he is, it can't tell him the future, right? And he wants to know where the white whale is going to be. That's the only thing that really matters to him. And he's talking to the sun right now, the notoriously uncommunicative sun, um, and decides that he doesn't want to use the quadrant anymore. He smashes it and like kicks it with both of his feet, right? And then he decides that they were now going to just be using dead reckoning to find their way around. But now was the time to head south towards the line where he supposes that Moby Dick will be found. Oh, and the Parsi's there, and he's also like looking at the sun too, but his eyes are kind of half closed. He's a sun worshiper. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this is him. Well, it's really a brilliant exposition of asymmetry, right? He can look up at the sun can see him, and the sun can also see Moby Dick. But the sun doesn't actually know where Moby Dick is in relation to him. But it could at least tell him that it sees him, right? And it's not telling him that. And yeah, and then we get this science, cursed thee thou vain toy, and cursed be all the things that cast man's eyes aloft to that heaven, whose live vividness but scorches him, as these old eyes are even now scorched with light, O sun. And so he's cursing the thing that's enabling him to navigate, which is one of many navigation methods, um, and or tools for navigation. You need a bunch of them. Uh, and he's blaming science because it can only tell him about the state of him in relation to something higher, but it doesn't give him the insight of his relation to other things at the same layer of reality he's on, which is the ocean, in this case, Moby Dick. And so, I mean, this is as shots fired as it's ever going to get for science. It's like, oh, you can measure things basically in relation to me. Einstein hasn't been born yet, by the way. In relation to me, but you can't tell me how I am in relation to anything else. And thus was the meaning crisis born. I mean, that's go ahead, Castle, take it away.
I mean, that entire paragraph is just excellent, and I knew that you were definitely going to appreciate that one because I read it like a week in advance. And but yeah, and that thing where he says, level by nature to this earth's horizon are the glances of man's eyes, not shot from the crown of his head as if God had meant him to gaze on the firmament. So there's But also, there's the materialism there as well, because that Ahab's not looking up in any sort of sense, But also, there's something that I thought was interesting was, well, before I say that, I thought it was interesting that it says a sneering triumph that seemed meant for Ahab, and a fatalistic despair that seemed meant for himself. These passed over the mute, motionless Parsi's face. So there is something
Mm.
interesting there.
He has a realization about something.
Yeah. It's like, oh, it really is interesting that it's like, oh, people are getting like wake up calls around this guy. Like even the sun worshiper is getting a wake up call around Ahab. And but yeah, I really liked. I mean, there's also this aspect of like, okay, I'm going to stop looking at perhaps the vain pursuit that I was looking at. Although he's literally in charge of like choosing where the boat goes. And so in a sense, like the navigation tools were more or less like legitimate. But fair enough, he's going with his intuition and everything, but then now he's only going to be looking at lower stuff. Like there was a mix before. At least he had that one thing that he was holding on to. And it's just like it's actually all downhill from here. It's full on paganism because he's not holding on to even the lower things like logic, reason, and rationality are now thrown away. And it's like that was still above whatever he's looking at now.
Yeah, it's a good point. He's he's throwing out the logic, reason, rationality baby with the science bathwater. And that's the and the pagan knows it. And the pagan realizes basically it's doomed for both of them. Right. And that triumph, I suspect, is a play on the fact that they don't care if they live or die. I think that's really what he's hinting at there.
And I still love. I mean, just as much of a psycho as he is, Stubb has some of the best lines, and just he sees the entire thing. Everyone else is the other sailors feel unwell after seeing that ridiculousness, and then Stubb just goes and says, "Thou actest right. Live in the game and die in it."
Mm. And die, yeah.
I'm not sure you want that guy's approval.
Yeah, it's a
He's
good
always
point.
happy. Why wouldn't he be reliable?
Which is funny that Stubb hates the Parsi, right? And now the Parsi is kind of distancing himself from Ahab, and Stubb is like, this guy's all right.
No. Yeah, never mind. Because we got to get on to that next chapter, right? Yeah, this boy, chapter 119, the candles, right? Warmest climes, but nurse the cruelest fangs. The tiger Bengal crouches in spiced groves of ceaseless murder. And no longer shall we hear about the beauties of the Pacific Ocean. But now they encounter a typhoon off the coast of Japan. And I have to imagine a typhoon in a wooden boat is just awful. Blizzards are bad enough without me being on the ocean. Uh, Stubb is, of course, utterly unfazed by it, and he keeps his word that he's always cheerful and always singing. So he's just singing his way through what is, by all accounts, a monstrously horrible storm that they have to run straight into because, well, that's the way that they're going, and it's the only way through there. But he's singing about the whale, singing about the ocean. Um, uh, yeah, and then they're talking about this lightning thing up in the air. What was that word there? The corpusants. Um, Apparently like a pre-lightning strike kind of thing. I have no idea what they're talking about when it comes to this. Um, but they have lightning rods that like run straight into the ocean, and they got to put those out because the lightning's going to be bad enough that could take the Pequod out. And while the lightning is going off, Ahab um, pledges his soul to the lightning. So that's very comforting that he would do that. and then somehow his with the masts on fire. Is that what happened?
Well, it's not really clear to me
Oh,
what's
so it's
going
not
on
just
there.
unclear to me.
No. There's actually a movie from the 80s called St. Elmo's Fire. Well, St. Elmo's Fire is a type of uh, electrical effect that happens during lightning storms. It's roughly equivalent to a large static electric charge. And so they yeah, fire, the way we use it is very specific, and fire, the way they used it back then, is not. And like lightning and fire are kind of the same thing not too long ago, like a couple hundred years ago. And so it's not clear to me if what they mean is just St. Elmo's fire, which would be dancing off the masts and dissipating.
So something
Yeah.
like that.
Right. I mean, that looks like
We would
full
just call
force
that
lightning.
arcing or something. Yeah.
That looks like full force lightning. St. Elmo's fire is more of a hazy glow, more like more of the effect you would get with a Van de Graaff generator or something where they just glow with sparkle in it. So I think if you look up St. Elmo's fire, you'll find instances of it. But that's more about yeah. But I mean, all kinds of things happen in this chapter, right? Like they're like, oh, set out the set out the lightning rods, which are not stiff metal but chains at some point, right? Because you don't want them all the time in the water. And Ahab's like, nah, I'm gonna grab the chain and dare the lightning and basically fight it with my will or something. And it's just like you're gonna fight the lightning with the force of your will. Okay, then. Boy, great pate, but I got a motor. Yeah, so I'll be moving on here. Yeah, it's a little crazy. Uh, and yeah, I think that it's glowing. It's not necessarily like burning because
So
it
it's
I
not
mean,
oxidization. That to use very precise scientific terms here.
no, it's ionization scientifically.
Ah,
Yeah, not that I know way more science than I need to, but also, uh, yeah, it's ionization, and it's also all three masts, and so it's not an actual lightning strike. But I believe it's this St. Elmo's fire stuff is what they're actually
okay.
referring to.
The same effect then was happening with Ahab's special blood harpoon. Um, and
Yeah,
Starbuck looks at that and says, "Look, dude, like going after Moby Dick is a really bad idea. If we just turn the ship around, the wind's going to blow us straight back to Nantucket. They'll have to pass um, the Drake Strait, which is still a menace for even modern boats because the Panama Canal hasn't been built yet. But at least we'll get home." And the rest of the crew's kind of like, "Yeah, dude, like listen to Starbuck now." And Ahab says, "Hey guys, you made an oath, so I'm going to hold you to it. We're going after here." Um, and nobody's happy about it now. The bloodlust in which they first pledged their souls to Ahab is now coming to full fruition. And yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So if you look up Wikipedia has an article on St. Elmo's fire. The second one, the first one's the stupid movie, which actually is a stupid movie. Um, but it's typically associated with boats, and their illustration is cool because it has the masts like with things that look like flames shooting from the top, and then it even has a note about Benjamin Franklin hypothesized that a pointed iron rod would light up at the tip during a lightning storm, similar to the appearance of St. Elmo's fire, and yeah, it's basically a plasma discharge, and it usually precedes lightning. That would be the key. Is usually when you get that effect off the top of those masts, what's basically happening is there's so much electric charge in the air that lightning is likely to strike that point. And then apparently it behaves differently on land from electrically isolated areas. That's why you get it on ships so often, because they're technically electrically isolated.
Mhm, mhm. Okay. Interesting.
So I think that's what they're talking about, right?
Well, that makes a lot more sense than the masts are burning, because that's an entirely different problem.
Right. But they call it St. Elmo's fire and call it burning, but it's not fire that burn. Like I said,
Oxidization.
right. It's not rust. It's not quick rusting, which is what fire is. It's just really fast rust. That's all it is. Let's make rust really fast. That's called fire. It is coronal discharge or plasma, luminous plasma. And that looks a lot like flames. So if you haven't ever done it, the only one I know of is in Boston, but go see a very large Van de Graaff generator. They do cool stuff with that at the Museum of Science in Boston. Let me tell you, that's a fun thing to see. That lightning show that they put on. I've seen it a few times. Quite good. Definitely highly recommend if you're ever in Boston. I don't know of anybody else. I think they at least have the largest Van de Graaff generator on the planet or something, but I don't know if anybody else has big Van de Graaff generators or Tesla coils or anything cool that can do that sort of thing.
I just kind of looking through some of this. So some of the things that I thought was interesting is, I mean, you've got the interaction between the sailors and everything, and once again, Stubb and Starbuck have a lot of the spotlight on this one. But it seems like so Ahab's boat gets cleaved in two during the commotion of everything, and Starbuck and Stubb are watching as they're just getting battered with waves, and Stubb is just saying, "But never mind, it's all in fun," and he starts singing, and because of course he would. And he says, "I tell you what it is, Mr. Starbuck. There's no way to stop my singing in this world but to cut my throat. And when that's done, 10-1, I sing you the doxology for a wind-up." It's just way too much. But then Starbuck points out that the wind is coming from the course that Ahab is trying to run for Moby Dick. So they're kind of intuiting, maybe superstitiously, but not necessarily, that they're being kind of pushed away from their supposed destination, which no one really wants to do anymore. and that the place where Ahab's boat was stove was in the exact spot where his peg leg would normally be nested into. So it was cut right there. So I thought that was interesting. And then you go to Ahab, having seen that everything is all wrecked and everything, and that Starbuck was trying to get the lightning rods, which of course have not yet been deployed, even though they probably should have done that way before. And things, at least from the perspective of the sailors, are on fire already. And with all of that in mind, Ahab says, "Avast, let's have fair play here, though we be the weaker side." It's just it's all just this ridiculous gamification of just the boat is on fire, and might be worse because the lightning rods are not only not deployed, but they're still on the ship. So I'm not sure how they're stored, but also you have lightning rods still on the ship. So, and then just the imagery that Stubb has of the sperm oil from down in the hold, eventually kind of working its way up through the masts so that it would become like spermaceti candles, is just too silly.
Yeah, and also they point out, although I don't think this is actually correct at all, but they say that the Cape of Good Hope is close and we could get there and go where we need to go, basically. Also, that is the direction that the ship with all the oil on it went, opposite of their own, right, heading home. And so it's kind of like, well, and apparently going the way of the typhoon, although this also almost certainly isn't true. It's the opposite. If they follow the typhoon, if they let it push them, they'd be headed home and not headed into more danger. Now, I think all of that is actually incorrect, but whatever.
I guess it would
don't-
depend on what part of the typhoon they were hitting, and because the wind is swirling, right?
Yeah, I mean, we really don't know where they're going, but I'm pretty sure in Japan, Cape Horn is much closer than the Cape of Good Hope. But I'm fairly sure he said it's the Cape of Good Hope is closer, but I don't think so. But I could be wrong about that because it's real close. The Pacific Ocean's really big. Just I've never been on it in a boat, but it is pretty big. Like, if you look on a map, it's like, man, that's a big ocean. The most isolated islands in the world are in the middle of the Pacific. So, yeah, I don't.
Well,
I
let's
don't
see if we
quite
can get
know.
our handy dandy map out here.
Yeah, we have a map of their path, right? With by
And
chapters.
it's matched up with the chapters. Oops, share this tab instead. Yeah, so we're at chapter 119, and that's pretty close to chapter 118. So that's right here, just off the coast of Japan. I should say that they would be closer to the tip of South America rather than the tip of Africa.
That's what I think too. But it's hard to tell, especially on that projection. That's a crappy projection for sailing. But yeah, it's hard to
Yeah,
tell.
well,
I mean, you have to actually do the math.
it's
But yeah, I
I
thought so
don't do
too.
math, so somebody else.
And they're sailing south, right? I think we've already started to sail south. And so really, yeah, I think it's just a lot of confusion about, well, if the other guys are going to Nantucket, they're sailing south too, because you got to sail south to get to Nantucket from that area. Like you're way too far north at that point. And so it's not clear to me that they wouldn't be sailing south. And so, where are we going? What are we doing here? So yeah, I didn't quite follow navigationally. I was very confused about where the hell they were, but I know about St. Elmo's Fire, even though I haven't seen it, or at least not on a boat live. I've seen it before, but not on a boat. Thank goodness.
Sounds like one of those optional experiences in life.
No, that's an experience you want to avoid at all costs. That's
Yeah.
don't want to be out on the water on a boat in the lightning or the potential lightning. Yeah, many a sailing excursion of mine has been scuttled by such events for sure. Yeah, it's a dangerous thing to be out on the water in a storm for lots of reasons. And squalls happen. So I've been caught in windstorms and squalls. That happens even on lakes. Very dangerous. Capsizing a boat it's not a good plan. Not a good plan. Not a good plan. So
Well, I think we can all agree that Ahab's plan isn't any good, and
I mean,
he should hear the voices of his sailors.
but instead he's going and saying, "Oh, you see the white flame on the mast? That lights the way to the white whale. Obviously, same color. It clearly lights the same way." And then he's there romancing the lightning,
Right.
and which is just it's a very twisted sort of pyromancy happening there. And then he has this line where it says, "In the midst of the personified impersonal, a personality stands here." And it's like, this guy clearly flunked Ignatius's Discernment of Spirits class, but he's I don't know. And then, but I thought it was interesting when he goes and he's threatening the sailors with his harpoon, which is at this point like incredibly sharp, stained with blood, on fire, and also a lightning rod. And he's going around that there's this thing of like people are trying to not get cut and burned, but also this dude is walking around just begging for lightning to strike him. So everyone is just running away. It's just, I mean, there was a ways way back when we had kind of had the discussion about whether or not Ahab had done anything like worth mutinying over yet, and we weren't quite at that point, but I think he's racked up quite a few charges against himself at this point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, well, and then, yeah, there's the mutiny here, so which he quells
You,
pretty quickly.
you mutiny, and then when you get back to port, you just say he fell overboard in the storm. Very sorry.
Well, yeah, this is always what puzzles me about the top-down power from above people. I'm like, do you really? Do you know how many stories there are of people outright breaking the law and getting away with it because they just all banded together and said, "Yeah, we don't know what happened to them." There was a great story I saw on TV a billion years ago, but there was a drug dealer in a small town, and he basically terrorized the town, and
Yeah.
he paid a lawyer a lot of money, repeatedly in cash, who got him off and kept him out of jail for like years. And then one day, I forget what happened, but I don't know if he did something to one of the townspeople, and they'd finally had enough. So basically, he just got shot in the street one day, and then effectively they couldn't get the local police basically were like, "Huh, yeah, no, we investigated, we can figure it out. Sorry, I guess he just died just died with a bullet wound in his chest." And eventually, like, his lawyer, I guess, who is obviously a stand-up guy already, like, got the FBI involved. So the FBI comes in because the Stadies came in and they couldn't figure it out. They're like, "Oh, we don't know." So the FBI comes in and they start questioning the townsfolk. And they're questioning one guy, and he goes, "I don't know anything, man. When everything broke out, I got under the pool table." And then they question another guy, and he's like, "Well, yeah, I don't know what happened. I got under the pool table too." Now there's only one pool table, and like there's like 30 people under the pool table, according to the story. And the FBI is like, "Well, all these other people said they were under the pool table too." And every single person to a man said, "Well, I don't know about them. I just know I was under the pool." The FBI gave up. They just gave up. And the guy died, and nobody knew who shot him. And they know he was shot, and they know he was shot by one of the townspeople, and they just had to leave. There was nothing they could do, And one could say that justice was foiled that day, although no sane person would. So yeah, and people don't understand. No, people can just do this, and it works. It works 100% of the time.
You have to get everybody on board, though. That's the question.
I'm pretty sure. So I don't know if it's the same one, if there was another guy like this, but the one that I heard, there was a lot more than one hole in him. I think a lot of the, I think the people under the pool table were taking a nice shooting position when they were.
That could be too. I mean, there's the end of Roadhouse, right? Like, I mean, these things happen, especially in smaller towns. These things actually happen quite frequently. You'd be a little surprised if you look through the unsolved murders, in the States and at the FBI level and stuff. This is not an unusual occurrence. You should be careful what you do in life.
Isn't like the entire plot to Murder on the Orient Express? Spoilers for anybody at home. Pretty sure that's how that one turned out.
Oh yeah, yeah, you're right. Yeah. I mean,
all of them.
Peterson does it right with the chimps and Friends DeWall, and yeah, it's an obvious point. It's like, well, yeah, if you look at this from an individual perspective, no single person can bring down the biggest guy, but any two people can. So, or any two chimps can, right? And right, it's just it's a paucity of perspective on your part. You're not understanding how the world works beyond you. There's not just you and one other person in the world. I have a whole set of videos on that, on navigating patterns, by the way. My early videos, actually. Yeah, it's actually really important to sort of understand that. And it's surprising because basically Ahab's claim is just the first person that tries it dies. It doesn't say what'll happen after that, right? Like, or what happens if 3 people try it at once. Right, that's his only. But you're right, Castle. I think before there was some question as to whether or not a mutiny was justifiable. But now, I mean, the guy is nuts. Like, now he's definitely nuts. And it's so bad that in the symbolism, it's implied that the doubloon is cursed by the fire or something, right? It's implied that even the doubloon that's nailed to the mast is part of this devilish, fiery compact, right? Because I think he specifies it's the mid mast, which is the one the doubloon's nailed to. That's the chain that he grabs and that he's daring the lightning with, which is probably the highest mast, not by much, but it's probably the highest mast on the ship. It might not be, they might be even, but I think actually that's probably the highest one. The tallest mast.
And in his first sort of ritual that he did, he basically enchants it, right? So at this point, like, it's cursed treasure that's just hanging out there.
It's cursed treasure, and it's twice cursed. In essence, the curse that Ahab put on the doubloon has now been erased by the flame, effectively, by this coronal discharge, this St. Elmo's fire thing, which is a cool effect, by the way. This coronal discharge plasma is cool.
All right. And I think with that, Moby Dick is cool. And we've gotten to the bottom of what we're going to get to tonight. So thank you all for your insights. As always, there was something to learn from each and every single one of you. I now am far less confused about this last chapter because I know of the excellent and cool physical phenomenon of St. Elmo's fire, which I would prefer to observe from a safe distance. And with that, I'll leave you guys to it, and we will meet again. And we're getting near the end of this book, so soon enough we will get to the exciting conclusion of Moby Dick. So stay safe, all of you, and watch out for the white whale.